Mic is on. Welcome to Remember When, a podcast about the moments that made us.
And so denying people access to marriage is not just denying people access to tenancy agreements and succession rights and tax rights, important though those things might be. It's denying them the status and dignity of being ordinary citizens in society, doing the things that everybody else does, simply on the grounds that they happen to love and be attracted and express the intimacy and love and affection and promise to support each other through sickness and health and all the rest, happens to be of the same sex. I just felt so proud to have been a judge.
That was former Constitutional Court Justice Albie Sachs during his lecture at the University of Chicago Law School in April 2013, reflecting on a moment that changed South Africa forever. His words cut to the core of what was at stake in the case of Minister of Home Affairs versus Fourie, a case brought forward by two women, Marie Fourie and Cecilia Bontes, who simply wanted the right to publicly celebrate their love and commitment like any other couple. But the law said they couldn't because they were two women. And so, on the 1st of December 2005, the Constitutional Court ruled that denying same-sex couples the right to marry was a violation of the rights to equality and dignity. It gave Parliament exactly 1 year to fix the law. If they failed, the court would do it for them by reading the words "or spouse" into the Marriage Act. This wasn't just a legal technicality. As Sachs wrote in the judgment, it was about, quote, rescuing love and commitment from legal oblivion, close quote, about letting same-sex couples live not in silence, not in shame, but in full view, with the law behind them. In today's episode, we go back to that moment in history, not only to remember the ruling itself, but to understand what it took to bring it to life in Parliament. My guest is Hlomane Chauke, who in 2006 chaired the Home Affairs Portfolio Committee. He led countrywide hearings, read through more than 5,800 petitions, and oversaw some of the most emotional and contentious public debates in post-apartheid South Africa. What was said behind closed doors? How did Parliament push through the resistance? And what did that moment mean for the country and for him personally? Remember when South Africa legalized same-sex marriage, becoming only the 5th country in the world and the first on the continent to do so? Ndate Chauke, welcome to the show. I want to ask you, what you remember about the 14th of November 2006 when the Civil Union Bill was passed by the National Assembly before it was transferred to the National Council of Provinces?
I think I will deal with this part, but I want to go back again. It dates back to the making of the Constitution, because that Constitution, I participated in the committee that dealt with human rights. So immediately after 1994, we had to embark on the writing of the Constitution. So there are different committees that were established in line with the chapters that are in the Constitution. So I was in the chapter that deal with human rights. So these matters were not new to me in terms of understanding the constitutional imperative. There's a line in the Constitution that talks of the state may not discriminate on sexual orientation. That line is what led to this case. Because discrimination on sexual orientation is unconstitutional in terms of the Constitution of South Africa. And that line is a standalone line. It simply says state may not discriminate in terms of sexual orientation. It leaves it there. Does not go further on that line. So when that process came, we, from the ANC side, having to interact, therefore, with this process. So it had to go to the ANC. The minister will then introduce the bill to the party. There's consultation of the party. Then there's a parliamentary process. parliamentary process, then you have what you call portfolio committees. But you have what you call study groups. Each political party have their own study groups in terms of home affairs.
Yeah.
So then I was the chair of that study group
group
of the ANC.
Sure.
That then process this legislation. So the minister will come, will interact with the minister. When the bill is now in parliament, the bill,
Yeah.
not the law, the
Yeah,
bill,
the bill.
still in making.
Yeah.
So we'll then interact with that process. So it becomes a process between ANC study group and ANC subcommittee on social, whatever subcommittee was that time, to interact, so that you carry the mandate of the party in terms of its understanding, either its views on the bill that we are passing. So it had to have characters that are informed by the party inside. Then there's a parliamentary process that then starts. Because now the bill is before parliament, the ANC study group has got a brief and the minister has outlined in terms of government. But that government position is more of a party position.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But this time around, we are guided by the constitution. The politics are limited because the constitution is very clear.
Yeah.
And they, as you have put it, that the foreign matter, already, the court has already pronounced that if Parliament does not correct the effect, Constitutional Court will read in,
Yeah.
meaning that it will then interfere with the current Marriage Act, which is based on heterosexual.
Yeah.
So Constitution will just read in. So that was the danger, therefore, that that led to a spark.
Yeah.
When you get churches and everybody who are anti this legislation to say, but we're going to lose the value of what heterosexual means.
The idea of what marriage is.
Yeah, marriage is. And not only that, they deal with what is a marriage. They will then between man and a woman, and they will deal with element of procreation and all of that, so that life carries on.
Yeah.
Compared to same-sex marriage that does not bring in an element of procreation. Now a society must grow.
Yeah.
Must move on.
Yeah.
So that was one threat that was coming. So by the time we come to civil union, the bill, we already had a lot of background in terms of our understanding general of the society and human beings in general. That's part of what a lot of people will not understand, the role and function of parliament. You look at MPs, things that they go there and sleep and no one takes them seriously. There's a lot of work that gets done in those committees, which outcome impacts on the society. But again, it's informed by society. Hence, you then have public hearings, you then have submissions that come in. So when this bill was now in parliament, one of the things that we had to do is take the bill to the people. That's when you then get those submissions, thousands and thousands.
But now, this deadline, this 1 year deadline.
Yeah,
but
it was a 2-year deadline. It was a 2-year deadline.
Yeah.
We have now to work before the Constitutional Court, because failure, it has meant that we'll never have the Marriage Act as it stands.
Yeah.
Because Parliament, Constitutional Court will then read in.
Sure.
What will now be called the marriage, but it will then include same-sex people.
Yeah.
So you have to now deal with the two and create something that accommodates same-sex marriage without interfering much with the heterosexual marriage as it stands currently, right? So you have to create that. And I think the navigation, how we navigated, it sort of brought everybody happy at the end. Even if there were doubts that society is going to change, things are going to be, our kids are going, but that has not happened.
Okay, but we'll get to that. Man.
Yeah.
When you commenced,
Yeah.
when the committee then started its work,
Yeah.
did you feel pressure? Did you the members get the sense that this was something you've never come across before? You've mentioned already when you talked about the establishment of the film and publication.
Yeah.
But did it feel like this was something very different, that a lot of the society, a lot of lay people maybe didn't even understand what it would entail, and therefore brought a lot of pressure, because this was a very different and very important piece of legislation that was rare around the world.
That's true. I mean, it was reading the Constitution first. Chapters of the Constitution deal with, there's an element that talks about God, God.
Yeah.
That statement is loaded because our Constitution is based mostly on Christian values and culture and tradition, but mostly its values, it's Christian values that drives the Constitution. And when you look at the Bill of Rights that we have, it's more of those values.
Sure.
So there was too much pressure, by the way. Having understood that part from the party, we're fine. But individual member, you then have to deal with that part. Now, I will share just a small experience, but quite a very serious point. I come from the Christian background, and my mother is a staunch member of a church somewhere in Vosloorus there. She's late now, may her soul rest in peace.
Yeah.
But then at the church where she attends, then becomes an issue that your son is in parliament and your son is passing this law.
You had not spoken about it, Ekai?
No, we have shared. I've explained it briefly because I always see her. Every week I'll go and see her.
Yeah.
And she was like, I hear that in your parliament work committee, you are going to pass this thing. This is Sodom and Gomorrah that you are going to pass. Now, she now has pressure. When in her church, when they pray through her to me.
You are not there.
I'm not there.
Why am I so to
I'm not there. I'm not a member of that church.
Yeah.
She's a member of the church. And then they pray that, please God help Hlomane Chauke that this son must not pass this thing. So she had so much pressure.
Yeah.
So I had to go and explain all the time to her. And this thing was broadcast live now, including the public hearings, all over the country. I mean, so I always have to navigate it. That was the most part that sort of came to me, that I needed to be firm to explain this legislation as I do to the public.
Yeah.
Because there's a public that I must go and explain this thing. But there's home that my family generally, my father was a polygamist. You understand? So I had two Mamkulu, my mother.
Yeah.
And so you come from those values.
Yeah.
Issue of same sex, something is very much taboo in that space.
Yeah.
Right? So I had to explain to her, but navigate her until she was strong and she was able to explain herself.
Sure.
Even at church. That because I had to take her constitutional requirements, imperatives, but again to share with the experiences of what's happening outside in life. With all these African values that were thrown on us, you then take pressure. Generally, you take pressure in terms of either its colleagues outside, comrades outside. Some of them did not even understand the position of the ANC in this particular bill. And you go there, Chauke, why now you let all of these things that they raise. So at some point I was known to be the champion.
Yeah.
Chauke let I'm a lesbian, what, all of that. So then it's churches. And in parliament, we then have other churches that are based on, your Meshwe church, the Christian what. I just forget the name of it. I've not been in parliament for a long time.
What is ACDP?
ACDP.
Yeah.
And they're pushing a lot there against.
Yeah.
And then we have the Democratic Alliance on the other side, progressive and supporting.
Yeah.
You know, and you find that in the debate in the portfolio committee, when we're dealing with this, within members, Chauke, you see, the DA, it's full of all of these gays and all of that. That's why they support this thing.
So it got personal.
Yeah, no, it got to that level. You know? So, but from the ANC, yes, we did have elements of comrades who did not, in fact, but ANC had to put its foot down. That's why even in the debate, you had the terror recorters and others who came leaders of the movement, and they had to come in and say, we're going to be part of that debate, because it's something that is do or die, or it will break the society into two, you know. So when we embarked on public hearings, we covered almost the whole country.
Yeah. How long did that take?
I think it took us about two months. 2 months. 2 months or 3 months, somewhere there.
Yeah.
But we covered the whole country.
Yeah.
We went to the north, and then we're dealing with traditional leaders and all of that. And then so in the public hearings, you'll then have two queues of different views. People presenting. So we'll then have people who are for the bill and who are against. So they will stand that this one's there for the bill and this one's against. Then they'll make their inputs.
Yeah.
Right? Yes. We went to the Transkei, one public hearing, right in Mthatha. And then people were like, are you calling to this Tosin?
Yeah.
Indoda. Ichati indoda. Or umfazi achathi ayikho lento lesixhoseni. Ningasilethela amanyala lapha, amanyala man. Le parliament lena siyidaki uANC wenzani? Usilethela amanyala manje. Asivumi lento le. Then there will be this other group that comes in and says, thina we are part, we like it. But no, okay, indoda nendoda nizowenza kanjani ke abantwana nini?
Yeah.
The house will adopt and all of that. You know, all of that experience that came in. We had people in the Western Cape when we were there who flew from the USA and some parts of the world to come in support and against.
Yeah.
You know, there's a guy that came, I think it was from the USA, in one public hearing in Athlone. Then, if I remember, he says, look, I want to play a guitar first before I make my submission. So he played his guitar. He was playing his guitar. And it's more for Christian. He's singing a song, I can't remember the song he was, but he's playing this guitar in a public hearing. Then he's done after that, he made this input. He said, you see what? God has made the world of man and woman, right? You, Chauke, and your team, you are going to burn in hell when this big fire comes. Because of this law, there's this big fire that is going to come. It's going to burn, first it's going to burn these committee members. This fire is going to come now. We're going to burn it. And it's one chair, you know. This fire is going to burn all of you.
Yeah.
After burning you, it's going to burn the rest of the world. God. So these are fears. These are things that people were bringing. But again, at the same time, you have people that are, you know, for the bill, you know. So we have to strike a balance between the don't like and the likes. Strike that balance. And this is what led now to us having to take the bill now to Parliament. Because taking it, we have consulted with the population. I think it's one bill since democracy, 1994, both the constitutional making process, which had a mega public participation, because all those committees that were established in terms of writing of the constitution went out, different areas, villages, to source and to get inputs of the people. Because that constitution, it was not written by bureaucrats there at the corner. There was wider consultation. Secondly is this bill. I don't know of any other bill that came after the civil union that has made so much interest to the public and so much participation with the public. Maybe the land appropriation bill. It's one of those. But this one, it has churches, it has traditional leaders, it has cultural people, all of that, who stood up and say no, others say yes, right? So by the time we get to Parliament, a lot has been consulted on, and people have made their input. So it was very clear that we will not want to upset the system of heterosexual marriage. And majority of the people in South Africa have said that we're more based on Christian values. And all that. So we have to balance that and then bring this civil union, which it's in two, if you have to look at it. It accommodates, firstly, the very same heterosexual people who is man and a woman, they can enter into a civil union. Man to man or woman to man can enter into a civil partnership. That's where we manage to balance the the Marriage Act remain intact, but allowed those in heterosexual to get married in civil union, and to get those who are same-sex to marry to enter into a partnership.
But you remember at some stage there was accusations that there were now two bills in one.
Yes. So that's where the balance came in. So you can then see that you leave the Marriage Act, that one is purely made for heterosexual people, men and women. That's where it goes. Then you have civil union that still accommodate heterosexual and any other person wanting to get into a civil union. And then you have a civil partnership that then accommodates those who are in same-sex arrangement. So that process is the one, in fact, that helps us. Because the Christian were more like, okay, well, say the majority of the population. No, it's fine, we're happy that our legislation is not touched, our law is not touched, and then the civil union partnership, they're more like, we're fine. In terms of their experiences of that, I will not want to dwell much into that space, maybe it's for another day. And the biggest fear was that this is going to influence society so bad. We're going to have so many marriages.
Whose fear?
The general, those who were
against,
right? Okay. But immediately after we passed that, the last time I checked years back, I think we're still sitting at less than 1,000 people who have opted to have that arrangement of a civil partnership.
How much studying did you have to do when on a personal level?
Look, I just use the general experience that I've seen when we're dealing with part of the laws. We come from the background of Mzabalazo. We take over government, we come in. It was still early, by the way, to have dealt with these areas. But we have spent time to understand what we are dealing with. We had researchers that were supporting us in terms of parliament capacity that goes out and look for, and then that alteration of sex and sex change law, it has helped us a lot. In fact, very few people in the country will even understand that there's this law in place. Maskula, when you grow up in Lukshin, it's a nice person. And people came to love that person. They love that person. It's jolly. It's what. But will then the state come in and then say, no, Tina, we don't recognize that. But that is what is the makeup of a society. You have all these categories that constitute a society in general. So we have to navigate that.
Did you ever feel like you were in danger? Like your personal safety was ever in danger because as a result of you in the committee?
No. I look. The fear in terms of that space was something I would not even think of it.
There were no threats.
It was only around me and myself that what I believe in too. But I know that my own belief will not supersede the Constitution. The Constitution is clear.
Yeah.
I may have my own belief, desires and all of that.
Yeah.
I'm a man, I believe in where I come from, in a home where there's polygamy. That's where I'm standing. You understand? That's where I'm standing. And I'm not shying away from that part.
Yeah.
You know, I still maintain and love my culture, practice and everything.
Yeah.
But I respect the next person's rights
Sure.
too. You know, I mean, it's almost more than what? It's 20 years maybe now.
Yeah.
People have even forgotten that there's such process that we've gone through.
Yeah.
It was just emotions
At the time, yeah.
that were coming out, and people were like, "Hey, azifuni lento le."
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
what? But when uhlala phansi uyimamela kahle, you realize this thing has been there for a long time.
Yeah. In a country where love had once been criminalized, the Civil Union Act of 2006 did more than change the law. It affirmed that same-sex couples belonged fully in South Africa's democratic story. It recognized for the first time on the African continent that love and dignity are constitutional rights. But even as Parliament celebrated a historic win, a quiet compromise had made its way into the original version of the Act. It included a clause, which is Section 6, that allowed state-employed marriage officers to opt out of performing same-sex unions if doing so conflicted with their own beliefs. So that meant that even with the law on their side, many couples still faced rejection at the very door where their rights were meant to be upheld. Here is a clip of Deirdre Carter, who is a member of the Congress of the People, or COPE, and she was introducing the Civil Union Amendment Bill to the National Assembly on the 14th of May 2018. And this was a private member bill, which means that it's a bill that is drawn up by private members as opposed to ministers or committees.
As a duly elected public representative, I have received complaints from members of the public that same-sex couples seeking the service of marriage officers to solemnize their marriage were being turned away from Home Affairs offices across the country, as there was no marriage officers in the employ of the state that were prepared to solemnize same-sex marriages at those specific offices. I want to give you examples. As a same-sex couple tried to get married in Port Elizabeth, but it was absolutely to no avail, and eventually they had to travel to Grahamstown. Another couple tried to get married in Chatsworth, then tried Commercial Road in Durban. They eventually tried to get married in Tongaat, but they were refused in all three offices. Instead, they were called derogatory names and insulted by public servants. That is all in writing as well. Now, Chair, clearly it cannot be constitutionally acceptable or permissible that public servants can be exempted on any ground from providing service to certain sectors of our society, in this instance for designated marriage officers to solemnize same-sex couple marriages. If one takes up employment within the state as a civil servant, surely one is expected to serve all citizens equally, impartially, fairly, equitably, and without bias, as the Bill of Rights and as Chapter 10 of the Constitution provides.
And she wasn't done.
Section 6 of the Civil Union Act provides that designated marriage officers in the employ of the state may, in writing, inform the minister that they object on the ground of conscience, religion, and belief to solemnizing civil unions between persons of the same sex, whereupon that marriage officer shall not be compelled to solemnize such civil unions. In a written reply to an inquiry to the then Minister of Home Affairs, advised in writing that of the then 1,130 officers or designated marriage officers, in the employ of a state that 421 had sought to be exempted from solemnizing same-sex couples. Now, it doesn't sound too bad, 421 out of 1,130, but it's 421 too many. I want to break it down. Home Affairs revealed that on only 28.6, that is 117 of the 409 of the Home Affairs branches, have marriage officers who are willing to marry same-sex couples under the Civil Union Act. In the Eastern Cape, there's only 10 out of 59 officers. In the Free State, only 10 out of 58 officers. Gauteng, 17 out of 57 officers. KZN, 29 out of 68. Limpopo, 16 out of 61. Mpumalanga, 10 out of 58. Northern Cape, 9 out of 22. Northwest, 10 out of 22. And in the Western Cape, 10 out of 34. Now, closer scrutiny reveals that the constitutionality of Section 6 of the Civil Union Act is questionable on the grounds that it offends the rights of same-sex couples to equality and human dignity as entrenched in Section 9 and 10 of the Constitution.
So it wasn't until October 2020, nearly 14 years later, that Parliament passed the Civil Union Amendment Bill, finally removing the opt-out clause. No more exemptions, no more half rights. The law now demanded what the Constitution had promised from the get-go: full equal treatment under the law. What we learned from Justice Albie Sachs at the top of this episode, and what Mr. Hlomane Chauke helped usher into our political reality, is that transformation is a living process. It doesn't end with the court ruling or a single act of parliament. It's an ongoing commitment to dignity, to inclusion, and to justice. So, as Justice Sachs wrote in the Fourie judgment, equality should not become the prisoner of past appraisals. And nearly 2 decades on, we're still learning how to set that equality free. So this brings us to the end of another episode of Remember When with Andile Ndlovu. It's been such a fun time getting back into the swing of things with this podcast. But if I can ask you for a favor, it's for you to rate this podcast. 5 stars would be amazing. Your ratings and your votes really do make a difference in terms of where this podcast lands on recommendations, on podcasting platforms such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if I can ask you to give it a rating of 5 stars and to also just recommend it and share it with friends and family, I really, really would appreciate it. Until next time.